Hey everybody, it's Nick. I got a couple of quick little tutorials about making low poly plants or kind of grass or plant life in Studio Max that you can export for Unity for AR apps. First thing I'm gonna do is gonna make some kind of a grass or kind of like a bush thing. I'm gonna make a plane and click and drag it here. And I think I want to go to edge faces. Yeah. So I went ahead. I'm making a lot of uh, like width segments, but not maybe a lot of length segments. It's kind of up to you. Once you see the method, you can decide how you want to do that. I do think you need an odd number of width segments, and again, I'll kind of show you that in a second. So I made a plane, made like this. I'm gonna go into modifiers, go to edit poly, and I'm gonna go ahead and go through polygons, and you can click and drag. And what I'm gonna do is give it kind of a fringe, and I'm just gonna kind of cut some of these out. And you don't want to you definitely want to make it, and it's every other row. And I would err on the side of making of going pretty far down the object. I wouldn't just cut like a couple off the top like I would, but I would go in a kind of a quasi random kind of order. It's up to you, but obviously the more of these you've got, the more kind of detail you get. So I'm selecting them and I'm holding down control on PC as I'm in polygon mode, and I select all those, and you can just kind of click and drag and select them, and then just hit delete, and you get rid of them. Okay, so that's what we're gonna get as a object. Okay, nothing too crazy. Okay, and I'm making this in front view, so F. Okay, now the next thing you can do, and this kind of just depends on like how you kind of feel about like making these objects, but I would go ahead and triangulate um, some of these. I'm trying to find the right function here. Yeah, I got to go to polygons. Yeah, edit triangulations. You can see the little edges here. So that's where the mesh is going to triangulate. So what you can do if you want to kind of uh, change these a little bit is you can just go to the turn mode and then just kind of flip some of these around a little bit just to give you some variety. When we distort it, it's gonna those are the creases that it's gonna fold along. And when we cut some of the tops of this off to make this kind of object, we might want some of that. So just kind of go through and you might just kind of flip some of these around a little bit just to give some variety when the form actually starts to work. This kind of zipper configuration is actually kind of nice. If you can do that, or if you have another method for that, that'll actually make it kind of nice. But this is all just kind of background kind of material, kind of foliage, so you don't have to be too crazy about it. So you do that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and collapse it to mesh. So I just did a right click, convert to mesh. You could also do a mesh. You can do an edit mesh modifier, but at this point you've already kind of done stuff to it. And then from there you can go in, and if you look at the faces of this thing, hang on one second. Actually, you should be able to go into the vertex level and then just delete vertices just to create like some tops that are a little bit different from each other. Oops. And you have to, if you didn't get the, and that should respect the facing that you had before. If you mess up, just kind of undo it, but that'll just give you kind of a fringy kind of top to it, and that's kind of nice. Yeah, so you do that, and then at this point, I mean, I would just make the material. I just go up to the top and click this, and I just make it. You could give it a green material, or you could just change the representation of it to green. Um, I think it's probably if you go to material editor, I just pressed M there. You could go in, click on this, make it a standard material. Let's see here, general C materials. Hang on a second. I guess just go to scanline standard material, and then just change the diffuse channel to some kind of green color. That's probably better than. Okay, now it's got like a green material. That'll probably transfer better when you export it to Unity. Okay, so then I'm gonna go in perspective mode. So I've got my kind of foliage here that I made. Looks like one of those sushi grass things you get when you buy sushi. Go ahead and go to the modifier stack and add a bend modifier. And I'm going to bend it. Let me see here, probably in the X. Yeah, and just wrap that around. Then you could pretty much go, I would go not 360. I would leave a gap down here. You can see that. So I don't know, like this is 340 something. Okay, and then you can go in and add a noise modifier. And I go to fractal noise, and you can kind of start to see the distortion happening as you distort that. And it's kind of up to you. And then you can play with the scale. Smaller the scale, in this case, the more distortion. It's not the bigger the scale. And so that gives you kind of a seaweed kind of a thing. And you can kind of play with that. So like you can some other stuff that you could do would be to go into the let's go to the mesh edit mesh, go to vertexes, use soft selection, and if that's not open, you can just open that up, and I'd grab some of those top things, and you can kind of increase you can see how that rainbows there. You can kind of pull it back a little bit. But go ahead and do that, and then I think you can you scale it. You can kind of play with that a little bit, just kind of pull it, and that gives you some variety. The other thing you can do too is you can like, so I'm going to rotate. I'm gonna hold shift and I'm gonna rotate this, and that's gonna make a copy. And then I'm gonna go into the non-uniform scale, so I just hold this down, and then I can kind of pull. Oh, that's actually stretchy. I guess I can just go here and go to Z, and just kind of pull that a little bit. But if you kind of make copies of these things and kind of rotate them and kind of put them inside of each other, you can build up some variety, with these things. You might even go into the materials that you've got, make a copy of this material, and then so I just kind of clicked and dragged it, and then you can change the value of that a little bit. Just rename the material. It doesn't matter. You're gonna export it anyway. So just you can kind of get some variety with that there. Since you made a copy of it, you can also go back and kind of mess with it a little bit more. Play with the scale of it, kind of pull it in different dimensions and things, rotate it. You don't have to make like a unique one of these things for every single like application. You can just go ahead and copy some things. Maybe make one or two of them and then rotate them. And that gives you at least something. And then you could go in the like faceted shading is going to give you an indication of what that looks like. And you can always go in and edit them too. Like if you made something, go back to the mesh and just say like, yeah, I'm just going to get rid of, a couple of these things. You're an artist. You can edit these things. Go to face. There you go. Now you got, you can just give it a little haircut. Everybody needs a haircut right now. So go to this one. Maybe even grab, and you can even do like soft selection with that. You can kind of increase the selection and then delete, and it'll kind of give you a quasi random kind of like way to like delete that. So that's in a way to kind of shape the form. So I can do the same thing on the other side. I could go into the phases, maybe grab this cluster here. That might give me a little bit of a way to like delete these. I'm not sure that's doing what I want it to do, but in any case, like that gives you can think about a way to give these a haircut. Let's see here. One last little thing. Get out of that. Maybe I can grab some of these. Yeah, so we got some shapes there. Anyway, it's just kind of a simple kind of seaweed kind of thing. Okay, let's go ahead and start a new one. Another thing we're trying to work on in our studio is some grass. I've seen some stuff that looks like spider plants or something like that. So one method to do that, I'm go to perspective view, make a cylinder, and I'm gonna make the height segments 1, cap segments 1, and the number of sides 5, just kind of like a pentagon. And again, kind of use your best judgment. You guys are artists for this kind of stuff. So I made get kind of a tube. I'm gonna add an edit mesh. No, edit poly. Sorry, edit poly modifier. Select the top vertices, and I'm just gonna pinch them. And what that's gonna do is give me kind of a taper, kind of a stalk. And you have to kind of decide how big you want it to be, but that's gonna give you that. And then I'm gonna go to the edge, select the edges, and then I'm gonna go to connect, open up the little settings box, and I'm gonna add, call it 5 segments, and then just click OK. And then what that's going to give me, if I go in, is that now I've divided it up. I did not divide it first when I made the cylinder, because otherwise it would only have tapered the top segment. This way we divided the thing after we tapered it. Okay. And actually, like, I would probably, let's go back. It's probably easier if we just take, once we've tapered it, go ahead and move that thing pretty close to where you want the end of the tip to be. And then go to the edges, and split them up. Oops. There you go, 5. Okay, and then I'm going to go into my vertices and just kind of sculpt this thing in the elevation so that it resembles the way spider plant stalk looks. So that's pretty good. Let's look at it in perspective. So P for perspective. There's one strand. Okay. And you can edit these things. I don't know. We'll see how this looks or whatever. But that's what the general kind of idea is. I'm just pressing G to turn the grid off and on. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is at this point I'll just go ahead and add the material that I added before. Just make it green so we know what we're kind of dealing with. And then we're going to use an array. And actually, yeah. So the way I'm going to go to 4 view here. Let's see. One of these has to be top view. So T for top. And I'm going to take the object. I'm going to go up to the hierarchy tab. I'm going to go to effect pivot. I'm going to move that pivot in a little bit. That's the radius that these things are going to be copied along. So it's important that that's offset a little bit. So kind of up to you. Again, you guys are artists. And then I'm going to go ahead, go to Tools, Array. And for the controls that we've got here, I want to rotate this thing. I'm going to click this here to say that we're going to go total rotation, 360 degrees, 12 units. I'm going to say preview. And so that's going to give me what that looks like. Now that seems, I don't know if I like that. That radius actually is too far out. So I'm going to go back in a little bit. Let's hit preview again. So that's what that effect is. And then the more of them you have, you can kind of click on this, you can kind of decide, if that's what you like, or not. So that's one way to quickly kind of make that plan. If you want a little bit more variety, what I would do is I would go ahead and take one of these units, go back to effect pivot, say reset pivot. Now it's back in there. And then I would go back to scale and I would just kind of beef it up a little bit. Just kind of scale it in the Y. And then I would go ahead and go back to the pivot again. And maybe, did that. Maybe go back to effect pivot and then get that pivot off a little bit. Maybe it's tighter than the other ones. And then I would go ahead and move that in towards the center and then go back to the array. And let's see what that looks like. And so that's kind of filled out, which is fine. So we had 28 of these. So let's go to 29 and then hold down shift and select those. Go to rotate and then just rotate those off a little bit. And we could even do some stuff where we go into the scale and the Z or sorry, in the Y, I guess, or even go down lower or something like that. But basically just kind of play with those to give them a little bit more variety. I don't know how much I like that, but and I think what I think these things need to droop down lower. Um, but that's generally the idea. Again, you can kind of sculpt with that. Some other it might not be enough segments for you, like that's fine too. You could even go in using some of the modifiers that we've already had. Go ahead, go to modify, and then just add some noise to it so that you get a little bit of variety. That's not bad. So then I can go back to 28 to 1, do the same thing. Uh, go back to noise, fractal. Really like that Z modifier. That was doing something. And then maybe go back and scale these down a little bit. And in that case too, I can go back since I have all this selected. I go ahead and go to my material and maybe make these the lighter material. I don't know, or maybe kind of uh, just kind of randomly choose two different materials. But that's not too bad. I think the rotation's too close together. They look too obviously. Anyway, and you can play with that. Like if you spend a little bit more time on these things, you could probably get a more natural kind of look. But that's a pretty generic kind of plant, kind of spider plant form, and or some kind of tall grass or something like that. But that's like a really quick way with modifiers to make that look good. All right, so hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see y'all in class. Bye.